Welcome to Beyond Revenue, Narratives of Revenue Leaders. Today I have a very special guest again, and I'm very happy that you joined, Toni. So, experienced CRO, worked in different functions, worked in consulting as well. Now a founder and CEO of a revenue tool. So I'm very happy that you're on board. But handing over to you, who are you and what are you doing?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Always appreciate those invites and spending some time chatting, especially with you, by the way. I'm Toni. Originally, I'm from Germany. Not that that matters all too much, but I've been now out of the country for a bit over a decade. Had two journeys in SaaS. One really where I went from basically employee number 7 to leaving the company around 50 million. In between, I was basically kind of for the team building up the US market, and eventually became the CRO. And CRO in that case, really all marketing, all sales, and all CS. So the full spectrum, if you will. And that was a fantastic journey, very much a mid-market kind of journey. So very much, you could say, like a factory producing that revenue. And I think that's what influenced me a lot. Afterwards, also my next gig, which was also B2B, also SaaS. This time, they were already at 15 million when I joined, so 1.5. And they were selling to small and medium businesses in the hospitality space, so cafes, restaurants, hotels. And I joined them 10 days before COVID hit. So that was a fantastic thing there. But I want to say we managed through this extremely well, and sold the business at the height of the COVID tech bubble, if you will, to Xero, the accounting software. And after those two exits, those two journeys as CRO, basically deciding to build a tool in the RevTech space. You kind of mentioned it already, really covering the full bow tie, and really focusing on making sure that you run an efficient revenue engine, efficient process, and helping our customers achieving that, right? Which fits very much into the current theme of, the efficient growth mindset and how do you do that? And I think we're like a tool helping with that.
Absolutely. It fits definitely in the focus of end-to-end planning, of efficient growth. I think that really perfectly fits in. So with your background as a revenue leader, what are your current responsibilities as a CEO?
I'm a revenue leader. Actually, you know what? I'm a salesperson. That's that's
Fair
who and
enough.
what I am. And I think it's we're super early, right? So I mean, you could say, hey, we're 2 years in. We raised some venture capital. We're building out a complicated piece of technology and product. Maybe that's just an excuse. But really, my role is managing the sales and marketing side. I have two other co-founders. One of my co-founders managing let's just say, the customer side and some of this, professional services piece that we sometimes deliver. And then the third co-founder is really managing the product and technology side, right? And for me, almost currently, my day-to-day job is content production and then running sales processes. That's what I do.
Nice.
And to be honest, I went into the CRO role not as this typical account executive, sales manager, VP of sales, CRO. I went into this from the commercial back office, from revenue operations. So this is completely new to me. Being an account executive running sales processes. So I'm a novice, but I'm learning fast. I would say, but probably everyone else would say that's not true.
I think you're doing quite well. So actually, it's an interesting career development from RevOps to CRO, and I think it gives you a good understanding on the complexity of an end-to-end data model, right? Because the dependencies between the roles for goal setting. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. But let's start with my first question. How do you see the role of a CRO?
Yeah. So for me, a CRO should be, and this is my opinion. So this is, I'm not trying to push this onto anyone, but it should be more than quote unquote just an elevated VP of sales. Ideally, a CRO is a function that you really need once you hit, I would say, around 10 million in ARR. Previous to that, you might actually not need a CRO yet. What you need is a good VP of sales, good VP of marketing, good VP of CS. But ultimately the problem that a CRO is solving is the increasing loss of efficiency between the silos. Right, that's kind of one pretty clear thing that does go away once you put the umbrella on top. And then obviously has responsibilities towards the board and investors, and understands product in a more holistic way, I would say, that really kind of fits the go-to-market side. So I'm blowing this profile up quite a bit more than maybe some other people, but really the actual responsibility of a chief revenue officer is to own the whole revenue number, and that doesn't mean new biz number at the end of the quarter. That means the actual total revenue number at the end of the year. Um, and I see in more and more organizations that you have a CFO handling finance at the back office side, HR, maybe IT, and whatever. Um, then you have the CRO owning all the revenue responsibilities. So marketing, sales, CS, in some cases, inside sales, in some cases, partnerships kind of roll up all the way up. And then you have a CPO or CTO, depending on the flavor, owning the product side.
Mm. Yeah, very interesting thoughts. And I think I couldn't agree more. Having a CRO who only focuses on new business or sales can even generate more struggles in a company than without a CRO. Because,
Yeah.
right, if you have a very sales focused CRO, you generate the supporting roles or the roles which are managing topics and along the customer journey, and especially managing a big part of their life cycle, the customer success. They feel they have no priority, no focus. So
Mhm.
it can generate a very toxic environment, right? If you have a revenue leader who only focuses on sales. So I'm totally with you.
Yeah, and I think it's and maybe to a degree you said the same things, right? But I think this is one of those advantages I feel coming out of revenue operations, stepping into the CR role, is I don't have a favorite team. It's not sales that I'm optimizing for. So in one case, I took over from a kind of CRO in one organization that created a weird way of optimizing the whole bow tie for sales. And he's a fantastic guy, and much more successful than I am, and hopefully maybe I will ever be. But what happened there was quite some optimizing of marketing towards sales. So kind of, oh, we only want to have the best leads. But then at the flip side, it's like, oh, let's allow everyone in that wants to buy the product, being pushed then into the customer success space, which can all be fine. But really, as a CRO, I think the responsibility is um, it's the whole revenue line item, not just your favorite team, so to speak.
Yeah, and I would say even more. Look, what we see quite often in with our clients is, right, there is so much focus on acquisition, yeah, in a recurring revenue business model, right? That we look at the management meetings, 1 hour management meeting, 50 minutes about acquisition. Yeah, we all the focus on the KPIs on acquisition, and then when
Mhm.
we look at the customer life cycle, we have maybe what say like this is acquisition, and then we have customer success and upsell,
Yeah.
and I try, or what I believe in, the CRO needs to solve the shift of focus because we earn only money at the customer lifecycle. So with customers are proper onboarding, activation, then proper upselling or cross-selling. And I think that's the real importance of the focus of the CRO. Because if the CRO then only focuses still on acquisition, I would say we don't even really understand the business model
No,
we operate in.
I think that's totally true, and I think there's more and more of a push to recognize that. I think this is number one, and I think then number two, it's really funny, right, with our customers, because we are deploying really tech across the whole go to market, across the end to end funnel. What we're seeing is folks have 10, 12 different steps from, traffic over demo page to lead to the different opportunity stages to new business. And then on existing business, they have upsold, renewed, churn, and maybe an implementation step, and that's it. And and that is sometimes mirrored also by the capital, by the OpEx that's being deployed into all of those different
Absolutely.
areas. Think about the sophistication that you have in many teams on the new biz side. And you just talked about the 50 minutes out of an hour is dedicated towards new business. Um, and the same is true also for the amount of talent, I would say, you deploy for hey, we can be a bit loose on CAC payback, but our gross margin needs to sit at 20%. Otherwise, we're dead, basically. And, sales enablement, yes. Enablement for CS, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
20 tools for CS and marketing, maybe you get gainsight on the CS. I mean, there's so many examples here that just show that CS is very much the forgotten, unwanted child of go-to-market in many cases, and I think it's a big mistake. And I think this mistake is increasingly so coming home and haunting us on the SaaS side.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's in my opinion a huge mistake. And when you look at numbers, so for example, Reuters published a study where they say companies who buy SaaS, 89% are unhappy with their onboarding, and I think 13% churn. Yeah, and when we see in what our clients think is right, though, in the beginning we don't need CS. Sales is doing it on the side, and then maybe if we have 500 clients, we hire someone in CS, or let's let the intern start with it. And I would say, like, the first 50 clients, I would even put more CS on it because I learned so much from them in onboarding, in activation. So it's a really important, such an important role. And what I think, and it comes to my next question, I think when you set targets and you understand the importance of the different roles, and especially of the role of customer success, you really need to plan capacity. So how do you set goals in general for the entire company or for the revenue team? And how do you differentiate between the teams? And how do you make sure it works out?
Yeah. So the way the perfect process as I see it, right? And this is really, let's just start this off by how does planning and goal setting usually happen, and happens on an annual cycle kicked off by finance. They need to do their budget, they do an annual plan, and it's going to be top down. They're starting at which number do they want to hit by the end of the year, aka which number do they want to have and sell AA23, and then they optimize the whole model to hit this number, right? Step number 2, and that's, by the way, fair. Step number 2 then should be, okay, commercial side, you as a whole, what are the things that, with the resources you're getting and that you want to be doing, how are you going to support actually achieving this number? That's the bottom-up plan that comes out of this, right? And ideally, at least in my world, that is not an exercise where you count how many AEs you need in order to hit this number. Finance can do this themselves, by the way. It's, how does the funnel need to look like every month? How does it need to behave? And, teaser alert is like, well, your top funnel needs to grow earlier than your bottom funnel because, that's how the nature of this thing works. And now you kind of sit there with a comprehensive set of, high level ish goals across your whole funnel and your go to market, and that's when you can now go in and start assigning stuff to people, right? And breaking it out. And I think what's really then important to make this real, especially if you're early on, you need to make sure that with everything changing, that you maintain a bit of flexibility on what targets you give to which people, right? If typical issue that I've seen, aggressive financial plan, aggressive bottom-up plan. You hire all of those folks in Q2 because you need them ramped in Q4. Guess what? You didn't hit what you wanted to hit, and those folks, you actually don't need them anymore. And, as a result, the target of the VP of sales needs to change, right? It's kind of, what do you have the resources for in order to achieve that? And equally so, if you now have all of those AEs in the chair and maybe you don't want to let them go, but your demand gen, your opportunity generation is just not big enough in order to support them, you need to rethink what goals and targets you're going to give them, right? And that might be more, it might be less. And I think people are sometimes getting extremely hung up in, hey, it's OTE times 4, that needs to be the target and so forth. But I think all of those are little fallacies that are being fed to finance, rightly so, that are then trickling down into commercial organization and being adopted without. So why is that again? Why do we need to do it like this? And I think this is where a lot of those target settings and goal settings are going wrong.
Absolutely. And I think the challenge here as well, so I really like it, there's a top-down approach, what we in general want to achieve, and we calculate with a bottom-up approach towards it. I see one big challenge here is quite often that companies use the end of year to plan the next year. but the business is a rolling business, right? So I rather establish something where I can review it more or less on a monthly basis and then adjust accordingly,
Yeah.
because then I'm much more flexible than on more or less forgetting 2 months of the year for my planning, and then I just run against this huge goal I have set.
The way I'm starting to see it actually, and the way I kind of sometimes pitch it in my role as an account executive here at Growblocks, is you need to think about it like a go-to-market forecast. Instead of a sales forecast, as a go-to-market forecast. And what do you do with your sales forecast? Well, you look at it weekly, you take action, you try and close the gap towards the end of the quarter. Well, the same thing you need to do with your go-to-market, but it's not only for your sales reps that are sitting there with a pipeline. No, this is for stuff that might happen or going off the rails on the marketing side. It might be things, folks you haven't hired that you counted on for next quarter and it's not happening. It might be a bit of pipeline in there. Don't get me wrong, but you need to look at the whole picture. Oh, and by the way, the forgotten child of CS as well, right? Kind of, what is going right and what's going wrong there. You need to look at this as an ongoing basis. And it's so silly sometimes. People almost force themselves to not look at the newest piece of information, which is newest data coming in. It could be from yesterday. You're 2-3 months into the year, and you basically say, nope, we're not going to look at this newest piece of information. We're going to stay in the point of view we had in October, November, December last year, and that's the basis of decision making for Q2 now. And I think it's silly. You wouldn't be running your sales forecast like that. And just as much, you shouldn't be running your go-to-market forecast like this.
No, and I'm totally with you here again, right? So it's important to look at the entire revenue team and plan goals for it and manage against it. And I really like the idea of looking at it as a forecast and then constantly adjusting. As well as, for example, if you have planned your goals for the respective teams, right? Roles along the customer journey, and you see the dependency, right? So if X leads coming into the demand gen and we process them, and we see let's say a difference in better performance in the SDR team, it will have a high dependency on the customer success in 6 or 8 weeks. Yeah. So, and understanding this and then adjusting your capacity as well, because right, they running full. Yeah. So, and doing another sales call is fine to a certain degree, but proper planning onboarding and proper planning activation, it comes to a point where you cannot manage them anymore. And then running again to the account managers who actually own the relationship, they run full as well, which most of the companies totally forget, right? They plan their account executives, and then we just have an account manager. It's like, how many clients should this account manager take care of?
No, but
right?
I mean, in one of our customers examples right now is they have a shortcoming on the support side. There's some, support headcounts that basically, what? Fuck this. I'm out. I'm overworked. This is not working out. We're under-resourced. What's happening next is that the CS team is basically drafted into that slot. Guess what's going to happen with them next, right? So kind of it's, once you're in this downward spiral, you really need to watch out kind of how you're building around this. And this is the thing that I sometimes see that is so interesting, for better and for worse with SaaS, is you have all of those forgotten knock-on effects, right? Kind of just like you mentioned, like, leads are actually better than I thought, and can we squeeze in a couple of more opportunities with EA? Sure, sure, I'm going to take another call or two, no problem. But even in the best case scenario, this is piling up and then sometimes being unsurmountable for then the CS team to kind of work through. And what's going to happen is you're going to deliver a shit experience to the customer, which, as you mentioned earlier, is then going to churn.
Yeah, the negative impact is enormous, right? It's like starting somewhere new, right? If the first 3 steps were shitty, you're only looking at the bad things, right? You see the next mistakes they did. And if the first week was amazing and everything was structured, and then we got into the thing and the people are lovely, and then you focus only on the relationship, you build the relationship, they do some mistakes a day early, it's fine, right? And the completely perception of the journey of the customer, of the journey with you, is so enormous. And so many companies, I don't know, they just put no focus on it. Yeah. And that's the risk, but that's the chance as well, right?
I also think there's some psychology here that kind of, comes into play. I think, let's just say you close a 200K deal. Actually, no, you renew a 200K deal. The amount of endorphins being released when that happens is like minor. To a degree, you expected this to happen. Hey, we worked on this. Our GRR is 95% in the segment anyway. So, they were bound to renew, right? You barely get a high five for this. But then you have a 20K deal closing on the same day. And, champagne bottles pop
Yeah,
and, people are hitting the gong and everyone is super excited, right? And I think this was an unforeseen event to a degree. There was more risk that it wouldn't happen. But then also on, one level removed, you have this 200K deal renewing. How much did you grow today with that renewal? You grew exactly 0%. But with the 20K
sure.
deal adding, you grew a little bit. So I can just, and I've seen it in myself, by the way. Yes, I'm way more drawn to the 20K,
Comes
even
the
though I hate
sales
it.
mindset, the
Yeah.
sales mindset out of it. Now I understand. I can relate. The point is, I think that's one topic of the CRO as well, to really manage this, to
Yeah.
see and celebrate it as well, right? And to put a
Mm.
focus on it, put a focus on a high NPS after onboarding, yeah, or put a focus on, hey, look, this account manager, we have now an NRR rate 110 or something. This
Mm.
is just outstanding work, right? Instead of celebrating the 5K deal. I can totally rate. There's a new client and we got it. We hit him.
Yes.
Totally fair.
So and this kind of connects well to one of the anecdotes I think I had with the teams when I was CRO. It's really we started, first of all, it wasn't a sales kickoff, it was a revenue kickoff, right? So clearly we started to kind of change the narrative around this, celebrating the sales guys, basically the president club attendees or something like that. That was kind of one thing. We then broadened the president's club. Suddenly it was everyone in the GTM could apply, and then it was mayhem because RevOps needed to go, product needed to go, and so forth. But anyway, and then also the dashboard that we looked at every day, we started to include stuff that is, also for the customer side instead of only the new biz stuff, right? And as you broaden your scope, and as the other parts of the bow tie start pushing against you as a CRO, and like, hey, there's more stuff happening. At least in my case, and this was also me getting educated during that time. You start changing your traditions a little bit, and with those traditions and those ways of operating, you will have to inevitably start pronouncing more kind of the other parts of the bow tie instead of just the middle, right? Which is,
Absolutely.
I think it's exciting, don't get me wrong, but you will basically need to broaden this out.
No, absolutely. And you need to put a focus on, and you need to put a focus on from management. If not, you just do the normal thing and celebrate every new deal. Let's go to the next question. What role does technology play in building a robust revenue engine or revenue architecture, in your opinion?
I think it's a so it's maybe ironic. So I'm selling RevOps tools and RevTech and all of that, wonderful stuff. But I think it's secondary, if not even further down the list. I think tools should be there to enable something, make things more efficient, make things more transparent, make things less chaotic. But what I've seen a lot, and this is my beef with revenue operations as a role, which is really kind of what I identify with the most still, is this obsession around tooling and, hey, we need to buy another tool because we've finished implementing this, and hey, let's have another validation rule, and let's do another thing here in Salesforce. And I'm so fed up with all of this stuff. And I think I'm getting to this point where I'm saying, you know what, push those tools just to the head of IT. Just push them away, not have them under revenue operations, not have them even under the CRO organization, put them to the team that also runs business systems in general. And make sure that you focus on the right stuff. Now, many people are like, oh, Toni, you can't do this, and blah, blah, blah.
I
It's all
disagree a
good.
little bit here. I disagree a little bit here as well. But
But I mean, I totally get it. I'm also not fully a fan, so don't get me completely wrong. But I'm starting to kind of see the counterbalance you almost need to take is, instead of seeing tools as the hammer and everything is a nail, you need to get out of this mindset, especially as revenue operations. Now, I don't think that CROs have the same disease in that sense, right? But it's certainly prevalent with revenue operations.
yeah, I can understand what you mean. I think that the challenge here doesn't come from the systems. I think the challenge comes that most people do not understand that these systems have no need on its own. I say that quite often because that's what the most thing I see in all these teams, in the RevOps teams as well. Systems. So the most important point in revenue organization, in my opinion, should be structures and processes. So what should we structure around the teams to enable them best to do their job? And then we find a tool which can fit the structures and where we can bring the structures to life with a tool. And then you're not constantly in the role of adding a new tool. It's more like, hey, we have defined structures, we know where we're heading to, and that's the vision and the goal. And now we find the tool which enable us. And then if I give the responsibility of strategy and data as well to the RevOps team, right, as a supporting role, then they don't only think about the systems, because I think quite often RevOps team are fully put on, right, they're used as the Salesforce admin. They're not the Salesforce admin. Right? They should be the strategic, structural support of the VPs. Yeah? And if they own the structure, processes, and data, and maybe only have an Salesforce admin to bring, right, where they can work on who is implementing, then they focus on optimizing instead of focusing on systems. Because I see that as well. I see sometimes teams, they have 100 employees and they have 80 tools. And it's like, what do you do with this? And we see 2 email tools, one in marketing and one in sales. Like, who talks to whom? But I think the problem comes with, one, first of all, silos decide on their own structures, and it should be one revenue structure. That's why I love revenue operations as a fourth or fifth function in the revenue team on the same hierarchy level. So I would put a VP operations as revenue operations next to VP marketing, sales, and customer success.
Me too.
And then they own it, okay? And then they own it, and then they support these roles, and then we have an end-to-end data model where the VPs managing performance and operations and teams, and they have feedback how to optimize, but the revenue operations decide what to optimize. And then we can put it better. And then let's say the CRO puts it together and holds it together and says sometimes no as well. But I understand what you see, what you mean with so
I totally agree with that structure. That's the structure that I've built myself many, many times. And basically, the structure that I then built out under the VP of Revenue Operations is a RevOps team. And then on the side of that, a systems team that is specifically only doing systems work. And then the RevOps team became the conduit between the VP of Sales, VP Marketing, VP CS to then instruct and work with the system admins in order to figure this stuff out, right? And now my, even furthering point is, it doesn't matter, and this is, I know it's controversial and it's, performed great on LinkedIn. But basically my point is, does the system team now still need to hang under the VP of Revenue Operations, or could it be sitting somewhere else? And the thing is, I would argue that the actual role of RevOps wouldn't ultimately change, while I totally agree with, what needs to be achieved.
Yeah, I think one problem with it comes up because what we see in mid-market companies where the revenue tools are under CTO, the tools are very theoretically managed. They managed in 1.0, but the 1.0 process doesn't fit the operational people. That's why we need the revenue operations to design processes which enable the people. And I think the constant clash of getting the resources of the CTO makes the team slow. And the development team should just focus on building the product. And these are just supporting tools and not the focus. And sometimes they put in so much focus. So they see that the development team is building their own CRM. It's like, guys, build your products. Yeah. And I think that's why I wouldn't put it there, because I think the risk is too high. But let's come into our next topic, because I think it's very interesting to learn from your experience. Can you remember one big mistake you did while being a CRO, and what did you learn from it, or how did you solve it?
So I think 2 main mistakes. Number one, we for too long, and again, this is maybe 7 or 8 years ago, for too long, we thought that AEs are this mystical creature that generates revenue out of thin air. And we took on a Series B, was serious money back then. Now it's like, oh, that was a big Series A. What did we do? We hired a bunch of sales reps. And we had this typical approach of like, let's have more closers because they bring in the money, right? Let's figure out how we can improve ramp up. Let's figure out how we can, increase quotas. And let's, because we're conservative, let's have a productivity piece where we're saying like, maybe 70% of them get to target. That was the revenue plan right then. guess what happened? Productivity went from 80% before to 50% after. Why did that happen? Well, we kind of, hired an equivalent or proportional amount of reps, and they just didn't produce more. We had more stuff that, more salaries we had to pay, but they didn't produce anything else. And it took us quite some time. And now, many folks have figured this out, obviously, as well. But it took us quite some time to realize, oh, wait a minute, what are they doing all the time? Oh, they're working on those opportunities. They're working on those leads. How many of those did we actually have? None. It was the exact same amount, right? So this was kind of one thing that then led to a huge reallocation of resources, reducing the AE team, asking how many do we actually need, not, to work through those opportunities, instead of how much quota do we need, and how can we distribute this. So this was a major shift in our way of kind of looking at the world. And then the number two big learning was, and it's ironic, it's both on the sales and marketing side, nothing on the CS side here again, right? Just an example, but it's cutting marketing too violently, dismissing some of the, hey, you can't attribute all of this stuff immediately. Only parts of the funnel you can attribute, parts of the funnel you can play this horse betting game of more money here because of CAC payback. The rest of the funnel, you just won't know. You will need to have a conviction-driven approach to figure out which marketing investments, put in front of your ICP and audience will lead to what result. And I've been too harsh, too rigorous, too little foresight, and honestly also understanding of the marketing function, going in there and making kind of big decisions and big cuts. We managed through this. Was also an exit, so everything is great. But I think this was one of the things that I, looking back, think we could have done much better.
And it puts a lot of pressure as well on the sales side, because then they're not performing, right? So coming to my last two questions, more about revenue leadership. So name one common misconceptions about modern revenue leadership you see on the market or in your environment.
Do you have like a prompt for that? So I mean, it's like, what is?
I think we talked already about one topic, right? Which is the missing focus on the customer lifecycle. Yeah. And I think, from my opinion, so one misconception for me is, for example, that even so we already understand the challenges with not planning in a full revenue team, we still build the company based on people, right? So we say, look, we believe in the revenue management, and then, well, let's put the CMO in, he's good, then we need to give him a C-level, and then we have this person, and she's here very well, for example, right? Yeah. And then we know the challenge, we still don't build one data model.
Yeah. Okay, let me go with this then. So I think current misconception number one, everyone is obsessing about the sales forecast, but everyone is forgetting about the GTM forecasting you need to do around it, right? So the sales forecast will just help you to figure out, are you going to be able to hit this quarter, right? And you can do the most precise and best sales forecast, but it's actually not necessarily going to change how much you're going to hit or miss the current target, right? That really is influenced the quarter before. In many cases, you walk into the quarter and it's baked. You can't do much about this. So this is where GTM forecasting comes in, where you need to look at the full thing, end to end. And I think this is really enabling you to start smelling like and growing like a predictable revenue engine, where you basically have the luxury where the CRO can always focus on next quarter. That was, by the way, my role and my understanding with my VPs. And I said to my VP of sales in EMEA and US and APAC, you care about this quarter, I care about next quarter. And every single time where we were able to do it, we hit, by the way, 12 times in a row. We hit quarter 12 times in a row with this approach.
Amazing.
And, the 13th time was where all of us started to focus on the same quarter, and then it didn't work out. So I think this is one misconception where you're obsessing about the sales forecast, but it's really, besides it being more predictable and more correct, by the way, it doesn't actually change anything on the outcome, not that much, right? And I think then the second misconception is probably around this, revenue attribution mirage that you kind of see. I mean, there are a couple of vendors popping up. They're trying to help you, right? And And really what they're able to do is, and I don't have any beef with any of them. We're not, overlapping anything like this, but it's, they're trying to tell you that you're able to attribute your marketing stuff through digital means all the way down. And that is really only true for the bottom of your funnel. So if you're kind of doing Google paid, like search stuff, or if you have review sites like G2 or Capterra, those are things where someone is going, they already have the problem, they're going to marketplace, and then they're clicking, and you can attribute that click all the way through. And that's fantastic. You should use it for that. But everything else, and this is, I sometimes call it, 50% of your marketing budget should be going towards selling the solution. 50% of your marketing budget needs to go towards selling the problem. So this is really trying to activate the 97% of your audience that it's not in buy mode today. So 50% of your budget should be going to that. Will you ever be able to attribute that? No. Does it mean it doesn't work? No. Right? And that's kind of the thing, right? You might be spending money on TV ads, on radio, on Facebook, on Instagram, and you won't be getting the perfect fingerprint click-through, but it doesn't mean that those things are useless, right? And if you kind of cut those,
and it's not
if
so
you cut those
important
things
even.
away, no, but if you cut those away, you'll be growing slower, and it takes balls to kind of make the right investments there.
No, absolutely. It's about in the modern world, they call it now demand gen, right? Where you focus on really generating demand, talking about the challenges. You don't generate leads, and then on a later stage, you capture the lead through, I don't know, Google Ads or whatever. Yeah. That's why, for example, the misconception in LinkedIn, quite often I see companies doing campaigns focusing on lead gen in LinkedIn, and then it's extremely expensive, and they stop it again. But LinkedIn is to educate, and then Google is to capture. And I think that's so very, very fair point. Coming to my last question, let's look into the future. Well, how do you see the role of the CRO evolve? What's going to change? What's going to happen in the future, in your opinion, without knowing the future? I know.
Oh, maybe I do. No, but I think whether you come from marketing, sales, or sales or revenue operations, I think the demands of the business towards you will be way more holistic than they currently are. Mm-hmm. I think there will be more, guardrails around who should be an actual CRO in the organization. I believe those guardrails will not be, hey, you're only really doing sales. That that will kind of you can't really be a CFO if you're not doing finance, right? You can't really be a CRO if you're not doing the full revenue function. I think that will kind of become more prevalent. And I think the other thing, this is my own little prediction, more revenue operations leaders will become CROs. And I think it's driven by two things. Number one, I see more and more, to your point, by the way, VP of revenue operations rolling directly to the CRO, sitting in the room and at the table where it matters, and they're becoming the Mr. Spock, the right-hand person of the CRO, sharing all the same worries and concerns and helping them to work through that, right? And then number two, they are able to step into this not from a position of bias towards one specific area, but more with the mindset of, okay, I have all of those professionals working here. Let me work with those professionals to make sure that everything works across, right? So I think they have a bit more of a humble approach, maybe kind of to form those revenue teams, actually. I would say a side caveat, I don't think it makes necessarily a bunch of sense to be a RevOps CRO before you hit 15, 20 million. And the reason is, before that, first I would question if you need a CRO before that, period. But RevOps folks are usually not the best sellers. They're not the best marketers. They're not the best CS people. And those will be things that you really need at that point in time, kind of that kind of function. RevOps CROs are the ones that make sure that the whole thing actually works out and it's scalable, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those are things if you're at 5 million, you don't care about that. You need the CRO that jumps on the jet, closes those big deals, it comes in a late stage opportunities, helps us with that. Your RevOps person will not be that person, absolutely. Right? So that's, I think, the caveat.
Yeah, true. And I think especially in the early stage, if you already get the founder educated to holistically look at revenue, right, and really puts the focus and understands let's say the importance of past closed won. I think there you can solve already a lot, because you can influence how the organization thinks in terms of growth.
I'm starting because, especially in Germany, RevOps and even sales ops still a very foreign concept. It's like, what is that? And really, the way I'm sometimes starting to put it is like, hey, you as a founder, and maybe you're a product founder, do you know what DevOps is, and do you know what they're doing? Yes. Well, RevOps is the same thing, but for your revenue
Absolutely.
organization, right?
Yeah.
And I think then sometimes you can see the lights go on, because they realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a couple of things I maybe don't understand about the revenue organization. And, revenue operations really there to help, put this together, guide this, look forward, do all of that stuff that that you probably will be missing by just having VP marketing, VP CS, VP sales.
Absolutely. Good. Toni, very interesting. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Love your experience and your focus. Very insightful. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Michael. And thanks again for having me. And thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.